Storage units are usually simply reptiles for unwanted items that can't be thrown away. Boxes of documents that have outgrown a filing cabinet or large equipment that does not have a place in the house. However, sometimes more interesting and unusual items find their way into storage. Businesses make a living by auctioning abandoned storage units to bidders, some of which are hopeful to open the lock and discover a unit filled with long-forgotten valuable family heirlooms. Something more sinister lurks behind the padlocks. So today, we will be looking at 3 instances where storage units were discovered to be hiding something quite chilling. Human leg discovered when Shannon A. Wisnant bought the contents of an abandoned storage locker in Maiden, North Carolina. He was pleasantly surprised to discover a barbecue grill inside. Excited to put his new find to use, he promptly took the grill home, ready to fire it up. However, when he opened it, he was astonished to find a mummified human leg waiting for him inside. After the initial shock faded, he called 911 to report the discovery. As finding a mummified leg inside of a barbecue grill is not a common occurrence, the media immediately picked up the story and broadcast it in the following days. After seeing one of the news stories, a man named John Wood got quite the shock when he realized that the leg was his leg. Wood had survived a plane crash in 2004 that took his father. The event caused him to have his leg amputated. Thinking at the time that he might like to preserve the leg as a memorial to his father, he kept it in a freezer until his power got cut off, and a friend of his who worked at a mortuary gave him some embalming fluid and showed him how to embalm the leg himself at home. After soaking the leg in the fluid, he put it in a possum trap to protect it from animals and hung it in a tree in his front yard for 6 months until the sun dried and mummified it. After getting evicted, Wood placed the leg in his grill for safekeeping and stashed the grill in his storage unit where it lay forgotten until Wisnant bought the abandoned unit and rediscovered Wood's leg. When Wood came forward to claim the leg, he assumed that Wisnant would be happy to reunite the preserved limb with its living body. But in a shocking and strange turn of events, Wisnant insisted that the leg rightfully belonged to him as he had purchased the storage unit and all of its contents and announced that he would be keeping the leg. What followed was a strange and entirely unprecedented court battle for custody of the leg that ended up being aired on an episode of Judge Mathis and stunned even the desensitized reality show audience. Judge Mathis ruled that Wisnant needed to return the leg to Wood and chastised Wisnant for his behavior in withholding Wood's leg, but required Wood to reimburse the $5,000 cost of buying the storage unit. The ruling marked the culmination of what had developed into a bitter feud between the 2 men that went beyond the true ownership of a mummified leg. The elements of classism and exploitation that were so heavily embroiled in the affair even sparked the creation of a hit documentary called Finders Keepers that followed the 2 men and the small town of Maiden as they battled for custody over the leg. Slap. Anyone who bids on an unopened storage unit takes a gamble on whether or not the contents will be worth something. There is always a risk that it will be empty or full of trash and your investment will be wasted, but there is also a chance of winning big with a diamond in the rough. Steve Bowen and his uncle Ken Bowen thought that they were prepared for every eventuality when they decided to buy an unopened storage unit for $80 in Rancho Cordova, California. However, nothing could have prepared them for what they had unwittingly just purchased. The first clues were several boxes labeled with danger poison, which they steered clear of until they began digging through the remaining boxes, which turned out to contain beakers, pipes, gas masks, and other accoutrements of a methamphetamine lab. They immediately notified the police, and an entire hazardous materials team was called in to suit up and search through all the toxic materials and poison, which contained enough old-fashioned and unstable equipment that the team had to wear full-body hazmat suits with oxygen apparatus when entering the unit and removing the dangerous and volatile chemicals. Along with all of the instruments and tools, officials also uncovered several gallons of meth itself. Although there is no indication as to whether the lab's original owners operated out of the storage unit or had simply moved the contents to the unit temporarily, it is not unheard of for labs to operate out of storage units due to their largely anonymous nature and ability to be abandoned for months if the owners suspect that they have the attention of the law. However, this strategy likely only works if you continue to pay the bills. The company that owned this unit had a policy of auctioning off any units that had not been paid for within 45 days, which is how the secret meth lab ended up in the hands of two unsuspecting storage unit bounty hunters. Additionally, because of the amount of incredibly volatile and poisonous chemicals used in the manufacture of methamphetamine, having a meth lab in such close proximity to so many people and their valuable possessions is a huge risk to both life and property. The fumes can be deadly to breathe in, and the chemicals have a tendency to catch on fire or explode. Because of these factors, the cleanup of an uncovered meth lab must be done by trained professionals and can cost upwards of $5,000. Fortunately, nothing bad happened while this meth lab was in residence, and it was able to be disposed of quickly. The police immediately began searching for the original owners, and, although they did not strike the gold they thought they would, the Boannons will likely think twice before they bid on another storage unit. Long missing bones found. Doris Woods was reported missing in Newark, Delaware in July 1997 when her husband Robert Wood contacted authorities and claimed that his wife had gone to visit her sister and had never arrived. After days of searching yielded nothing, police began to suspect that something more sinister may have happened to the poor woman. They returned to interview Robert, many including the attics, crawl spaces, and surrounding property. However, their searches yielded nothing, and they had no reason to suspect that Robert was guilty in the disappearance of his wife. In fact, Robert was very well liked in the Scottsboro area where he lived, although his co-workers reported that he seemed rather like a loner and did not appear to have any family or close friends in the area. He had moved to the town after relocating several times in the years following his wife's disappearance, and had settled in Scottsboro, Alabama, where he worked at a grocery store until he became sick and died in a hospital at age 59. It was at this point that, because he did not have any next of kin or even close friends, his storage unit went up for auction after the bill went unpaid for several weeks. When Stephen Terry and his father bought the contents of the abandoned locker for $170, they were hoping to find something valuable stashed away in the contents. What they were not expecting to find, however, was human remains. Hidden away in the corner were 3 yellow plastic grocery bags filled with human bones covered in dirt. They immediately contacted the authorities, who analyzed the bones and were able to make a positive identification based on dental records. The bones belonged to Robert's missing wife, Doris and Woods. Although authorities are still attempting to analyze the exact cause of and circumstances behind the death, they have said that the state of the bones and the dirty bags indicates that they were likely buried at some point and then uncovered before being placed in the storage unit. Additionally, both of the femur bones had been sawed in half with what appeared to be a power saw, likely so that they would fit into the bags. Because Robert moved away from the city of his wife's now suspected murder 7 years after her disappearance, but continued to pay the rent for the storage unit, many suspect that he kept the bones buried nearby, perhaps even on his own property until he moved away, after which he stored them in the unit so that they would not be uncovered by the next owner. Robert's former co-workers were shocked at the news, saying that they would never have imagined him killing his wife and then hiding her body, proving that you never really know someone until you know what they have hidden in their storage unit. Storage unit finds are always a gamble and can either be highly lucrative or incredibly disappointing for the unsuspecting buyer. There is always the small chance that there could be bone-chilling items inside, such as human remains. Perhaps the moral of this story is that when it comes to purchasing abandoned storage units, sight unseen, buyer beware. But what do you make of these storage units, and would you bid on one? On the fateful night of April 15th, one ship was launched into worldwide fame for all the wrong reasons. Known as the Titanic, this unsinkable ship was going on its first luxury maiden voyage across the Atlantic Ocean, carrying over 2,240 passengers and crew. The hull was known as the largest movable man-made structure in the entire world, and over 100,000 people excitedly gathered to watch it set sail. Little did they know, the ship was doomed to sink beneath the icy depths a few days later. It all took place on a calm, moonless night. Everything was well until a lookout suddenly spotted an iceberg in the distance. The engines were quickly reversed, but it was already too late. They watched in sheer horror as it grazed the side of the ship, powerless to do anything. Yet they caught a breath of relief when no serious damage appeared to occur. What the crew and passengers did not yet know was that below the waterline the iceberg had created a jagged 300-foot slash across the hull. By the time they realized sea water had already entered over 5 compartments. At that moment, the captain knew the unsinkable ship was going to sink. What then followed was a period of intense panic and disorientation that would lead to failed procedures and moments of bravery and sacrifice. At the end of the night, only 705 people had survived. The rest of the 1,517 people had drowned and slipped under the freezing water's surface along with the ship. From then on, the location of the ship was a complete mystery at the time. It was not until 1985, nearly 74 years later, that the rusted corpse of the ship would finally see the light again. However, many mysteries about the ship still remained. Because it had become an international living legend, many haunting theories had emerged from the depths. So today, here at Unexplained Mysteries, we'll be shedding light on 3 of the most chilling mysteries involving the Titanic. Fire aboard the Titanic. You have just heard that the reason the Titanic sank was because of an iceberg. Well, what if that was not true at all? What if, in fact, the ship sank because of fire instead? This is exactly what one Irish investigative journalist called Sinan Maloney claims to have happened. After doing in-depth research for more than 30 years, he believed that a fire had caused the ship's hull to weaken. In other words, what could have been a small iceberg collision turned into a major disaster because of the damaged hull, along with criminal negligence. What had apparently taken place was that of fire, allegedly burning since the ship had launched from the Belfast shores. It smoldered on for 4 long days before it was put out, yet the damage had already been done. The once strong steel was now weakened and more brittle than ever, nearly 1,000 degrees Celsius. The iceberg was the tipping point that completely shredded the hull apart, letting the cold Atlantic waters inside. Maloney never believed that the 300-foot gash would have come from a small graze alone. In his documentary called Titanic, The New Evidence, he explains how the ship's hull had various dark and mysterious marks in several auction photographs. What were these marks? Apparently, no one had ever investigated them before. He claims that the fire was greatly downplayed at the time. No one even bothered to think that the fire could have been the whole root cause of the catastrophe that took place. Part of the reason why that might have happened was that Maloney speculated that people were too eager for the Titanic to launch. Because it had been delayed more than once, it was easier to overlook a small fire. However, Maloney believes that given the fire, the ship should have never set out to sea. Perhaps if people had taken the time to study those marks and delayed the ship one more time, the maiden voyage would have been successful. However, it was human error and the hand of fate that played a cruel twist in the mystery of the Titanic. The prediction of the Titanic sinking. There is no question about it that hundreds of stories, books, and famous movies have resulted from this tragic event. In fact, you might have even watched or cried over several of them yourself. However, have you ever heard about the fictional stories written before disaster struck that seemingly predicted the event that would unfold? In an eerie twist of fate, 2 works crafted years before seemed to closely resemble the what would happen aboard the Titanic. Yet stories about ocean liners were also popular at that time. Could it have been a mere coincidence? We will leave that for you to decide. Introducing the first work, called How the Mail Steamer Went Down in Mid-Atlantic by Survivor, it was penned by a spiritualist and investigative journalist named W.T. Stead in 1886. He told a tale of an unnamed ocean liner that sank in the Atlantic after colliding with a small sailing ship amid heavy fog. The main character was a sailor named Thompson, who became concerned about the lifeboat shortage on deck. As soon as the ocean liner began to sink, women and children were first given priority. Panic would also take, which resulted in only 200 survivors out of the original 700 passengers. The author concludes with a haunting line, "This is exactly what might take place and what will take place if the liners are sent to sea short of boats." The author in real life was convinced that he would end up dying from lynching or drowning. He ended up dying by the latter method and on no other ship than the Titanic itself. Coincidence still? We think not. Yet that is not the only fictional story that mysteriously resembles the Titanic. In a short novel called The Wreck of the Titan or Futility, a ship called the Titan sails into the North Atlantic, hits an iceberg and disastrously sinks. What is even more striking is how many connections and similarities there are between the design of the Titan and what the structure of the Titanic is like in real life. Were these authors somehow time travelers, prophets, fortune tellers, or was all this just a cruel coincidence? Whatever it may be, there is certainly no doubt that this haunting mystery will continue to live on. Haunted Mirror up for auction. There are 3 ways that you can get to know more about the captain of the Titanic, named Edward John Smith. Because he went down with the ship, you, unfortunately, cannot sit down and have a chat with him. However, if you were a time traveler, you could go back and meet him. Another way is by doing a classic internet search to learn more about his life. The last method is by glancing into his mirror. Had left one mirror on his dressing table. Perhaps it was the last mirror he had ever looked into before he left the shores. 110 years later, this antique now is deemed to be possessed by his ghost and was recently up for auction. The first spirit encounter was when his maid took the mirror back home and claimed she could see his face appear annually when it came to the Titanic's until somehow ended up abandoned. Then a man named David Smith found it and had it locked in a vault of his for over 5 years, accompanied by a small handwritten note about the mirror's ghostly past. Finally, the mirror left the vault and was put up for auction. It was a museum from Las Vegas that eventually won the bid, forking out over £2,800 for the rights to own it. Perhaps, if you are lucky, you might just be able to come across this mirror for yourself one day upon the next anniversary of the Titanic. As you gaze into the glass, do not expect to see your own reflection. You might just find yourself standing face to face with the ill-fated captain himself. But what do you make of these 3 different views, and which do you believe? You might have thought you were tough if you managed to wake up before 12 noon on a weekend. However, while you might spend a few extra hours in bed curled up with snacks in one hand and your favorite book or TV show on, some other people out there might have a slightly different definition of what it means to be truly tough. Do you think you might be up for the challenge of the military or the special forces? Many people who do join forgo many of the luxuries and safeties of daily life that we all take for granted. They often go through intense training and encounter many dangerous situations every day out on the field, never knowing if they might make it back home. But what exactly do those intense training programs consist of? Would you consider leaving your current life behind to take up the physical and mental challenges that these programs entail? So today, we're here to shed some light on the 3 toughest training programs in the world. The Spetsnaz training in Russia. The Spetsnaz is the country's name for the special and armed forces that make up part of the military. The idea for these forces was first proposed by a military theorist named Mikhail Svechnikov, who believed that a small group of well-trained soldiers could carry out a series of strikes to slow down larger forces' fighting abilities. His theory was implemented by the grandfather of the Spetsnaz, Colonel Ilya Starin, and only grew in success from there. However, for a long time, no one knew what exactly the training process looked like. In fact, it was purposefully kept as a guarded secret for many decades, and barely anyone outside Russia's federal agency or special operations directives knew about their full fighting capabilities. It was not until Mikhail Gorbachev's reign in the 1980s when his new policy of glasnost finally revealed Russian state secrets to the broader world. Those secrets included the fascinating stories and feats of the Spetsnaz, which were propelled to great attention in the Western world. People read ex-agent first-hand accounts of what Spetsnaz psychology and combat looked like, which led to a huge rising interest in the training process. In essence, the Spetsnaz consists of over 15,000 operatives and specialists who engage in covert operations, sabotages, assassinations, and reconnaissance. Before they endure the harsh training requirements, they must complete basic military training beforehand. That is because as soon as they start Spetsnaz training, They are thrust into a pressurized environment that consists of physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual pain. Everyone is driven to their breaking point and beyond. Training practices include assault coursework under live fire, martial arts with live-bladed weapons, and the use of weaponry. It is not often that an operative emerges without stab and flesh wounds. They also engage in skills training that teaches them infiltration methods involving foreign language and culture, how to best locking systems, silent kill techniques, parachuting, long exposure, and more. That's not all. If you wanted to become a naval Spetsnaz, you would have to go through even more training underwater and deal with every type of assault method, explosive and weapon, that could be detonated upon you in the deep. Without question, the Spetsnaz training program is nothing short of tough. That is why they have achieved a reputation as one of the best special operations forces in the world. The missions they have engaged in are arguably even more mysterious and interesting. However, that is a story for another day. Navy SEALs, did you know that only 200 to 250 candidates out of every 1,000 would actually pass the Navy SEAL training program? Without a doubt, it takes guts to endure all the challenges that being a part of the U.S.'s sea, air, and land forces requires you to overcome. Even applying alone is tough. In fact, plenty of Olympic athletes have tried their shot and failed. You would need to not only pass a medical screening, but a vocational aptitude battery, a resilience test, and a physical screening as well. If you pass all the above, your journey has only just begun. Instantly, you will start stage 1 of the training process, which is the Naval Special Warfare Preparatory School. It is a 2-month period where you will try to build your physical fitness and your mental toughness. To graduate this step, some of the requirements you will have to meet include being able to do at least 70 push-ups in under 2 minutes, at least 10 pull-ups in under 2 minutes, and a 4-mile run with shoes and pants under a mere 31 minutes. Next, you will finally arrive at stage 2, which is the Naval Special Warfare Orientation. For 3 whole weeks, you will be exposed to what the lifestyle of a special operations officer would look like by tackling obstacle courses, getting better at swimming, and building up key values in teamwork and perseverance. If you demonstrate enough promise, you might even be handpicked by instructors to undergo underwater demolition training. Otherwise, you are headed straight to stage 3 of basic conditioning, which most Navy SEALs would argue is the hardest stage out of them all. You will not only continue to develop physical training, water competency, mental strength, and teamwork, but your requirements will only increase week after week for 7 in total. Do not forget that your events are timed, so you've got to keep the pace up. It may come as no surprise that this is the week most people choose to leave the program. In fact, it is so tough that it has been dubbed as Hell Week. In a 5.5-day period, you will only get around 4 hours of sleep total. And as expected, your training activities would take up 20 hours per day. Your body will no doubt feel the intense pain of running over 200 miles. Once you pass Hell Week, though, you have what it takes to be a Navy SEAL. The 4th stage is combat diving, which gets you accustomed to the ins and outs of combat out in the open waters. After that, you have arrived at stage 5, which is land warfare training. You will learn all about weapons, how they are used on the battlefield, warfare tactics, strategies, and much more. Finally, you will spend the last 3 weeks of this training practicing your skills in an environment that mimics real missions. At last, you will have made it to the final stage, which is the SEAL qualification training. At 26 weeks, it is the longest stage of the entire process, which teaches you more tactical skills that you will need, such as land navigation, medical skills, survival, parachute operation, and more. Congratulations! You have received your SEAL Trident, and you will be formally assigned to a SEAL team. You have just completed one of the most intense and toughest training programs in the world. Me 6. Do you consider yourself a man of character, integrity, and intellect, combined with imagination and subtlety? Well, you would be well qualified to join MI6 according to a 1948 document, which sought to define the future for Britain's Foreign Intelligence Agency. Fast forward to the present, and international relations is in a tougher spot than ever. As countries become a bigger threat for Britain, MI6 needs more recruits than ever. MI6 also want more people who are well-versed in computers. Believe it or not, Many of the MI6 staff are office-based and do not live a James Bond lifestyle. It is those who are field operatives, otherwise known as intelligence officers, that take on similar work to the movie star. Their main purpose is to gather intelligence and become masters of espionage. To carry this out, they will be trained to blend in, craft cover stories for themselves, and work on their deception skills. Will also receive basic firearm and martial arts defense training in case the need should arise. However, much of the training that an MI6 recruit will undergo remains a mystery. In fact, much of the agency's work in general is kept a secret, and with good reason. However, your curiosity should never stop you. The best way to find out more about Britain's secret intelligence service is to become part of the staff itself. The ideal recruit is someone who possesses a balance between emotional intelligence and IQ, no matter what their background is. If that sounds like you and you are a fighter in life, you might just be able to uncover this mystery and keep the secret for yourself. But what do you make of these training programs, or are you happy with just a book? Keenan, Barger, and Cowie Void. After the formation of the Big Bang, as matter and energy spread out from a singularity, it mostly spread out in a uniform way, predictable by most mathematicians and physicists educated in the matter. However, in recent years, it has come to the attention of many academics that though this might hold true for everywhere else in the known universe, this does not happen to be the case for the area around our immediate galaxy. It appears that our home galaxy, the Milky Way galaxy, is at the center of a vast desert in regards to the universe, existing in the middle of one of the largest observed voids in all of the observable universe. This void is referred to as the KBC void, after its founders and lead researchers who came across this peculiar anomaly in each of their independent studies using various methods to prove the existence of this void and the lack of matter. Given the fact that the universe will normally disperse energy in organized filaments, it seems incredibly odd that our galaxy would find itself formed in the middle of essentially nothingness. Though these findings were made back in 2013 and the research data surrounding this information is fairly recent in its discovery, this finding has been at the center of many conspiracy theory claims, believing that perhaps the cause for this void comes from something artificial and not a natural anomaly of the universe. This can be further supported by the fact that the strange KBC void appears to be almost perfectly spherical in nature. Almost as if our galaxy was at the center of a massively growing explosion that spread out evenly in all directions. According to Nikolai Kardashev, the Russian astrophysicist who helped to design the metric of the Kardashev scale to accurately map out the advancements of the level of technological prowess of a civilization, he believed that not only would advanced civilizations require an incredibly high output of energy requirements, but that looking for these pockets of energy or lack of energy could be clear signs of advanced extraterrestrial life and its energy requirements and usage. This could mean that the void we find ourselves to be within could be the substantial amount of evidence required to prove the energy requirements of a surrounding advanced extraterrestrial civilization. Dr. Story Musgrave. Our second bizarre story is that of the strange objects captured by Dr. Story Musgrave in space. Franklin Story Musgrave, known as Story Musgrave, was born in 1935 in Stockbridge, Massachusetts. One of 7 children, Musgrave grew up to become a physician and a NASA astronaut, despite having come from an extraordinarily dysfunctional family full of abuse and alcoholism. In 1996, he became only the second astronaut to fly on 6 space flights. A highly intelligent individual, he holds 6 academic degrees, making him the world's most formally educated astronaut. In 1998, Musgrave held the record for the oldest person in orbit at age 61. With a huge variety of interests and a highly diverse range of career experiences, Musgrave has obviously had a very interesting life. One of the most curious tales of his space career was one involving a strange sighting from his spacecraft. Musgrave has said to have seen on at least 2 of his missions something he can only describe as a snake-looking being at least 6 to 8 feet long, looking rubbery due to internal waves, and Musgrave believes the snake follows you for long periods of time throughout space, and appeared to swim due to the velocity of the nearby spacecraft. Due to the lack of gravity in space, items like the snake are able to glide freely, in what Musgrave calls an extraordinary ballet. The only theory that Musgrave has to explain the strange object is that it may have been an uncritical rubber seal from the main engines. Interestingly, Musgrave has a strong belief in the existence of other life forms, a belief that was crystallized on his many space voyages. He says, the more you fly in space, the more you see an incredible amount of things out there, and that sort of thing brings to you really a certainty that other living creatures are out there. In other interviews, he has said, I feel that they're everywhere out there, and they're doing interstellar travel. We'll think differently about ourselves once we accept that. Now, 84, it is unlikely that for his bizarre sightings while in space. However, the fact that such an intelligent and accomplished individual believes with such conviction that we are not alone in the universe is a comfort to those who adamantly believe that humans are not the only species inhabiting the universe. UFO captured by International Space Station's cameras. In February 2020, a truly strange occurrence was captured by the International Space Station's cameras. Viewers were astonished to see what appeared to be a UFO following the International Space Station, also known as ISS, for around 20 minutes. The bizarre sighting was captured on the U.S. Space Agency's live camera as they were doing routine maintenance. The footage appears to show a mysterious cone-shaped object zooming above the International Space Station. At one point in the video, NASA's camera actually focuses on the object, as if to query the nature of the unidentified item. The footage is 22 minutes long in total. The object consistently moves at the same speed as the ISS, which is estimated to have a velocity of an incredible 78 kilometers per second. In a truly inexplicable twist, at the end of the footage, the UFO, which is believed to be around the same size as a bus, shoots upwards and disappears, leaving behind a green burst of light. What could this UFO be? It seems that there is no explanation for the sighting. However, some have speculated that the UFO may be some sort of secret military technology. This is not the only example of a recent UFO caught on camera. Back in 2016, an eerie light was identified near Earth on the NASA live feed. Soon after it appeared, the feed abruptly stopped, with NASA later claiming that the object was either space debris, a reflection, or light from Earth. In another case, while watching the live stream from the International Space Station in April 2020, viewers were similarly shocked to see a cylindrical object. The live feed from the ISS suddenly went down and the live stream was cut off. A former NASA engineer has described the sighting as nothing more than a space dandruff. The former engineer James Oberg said, I've had enough experience with real spaceflight to realize that what's being seen in many videos is nothing beyond normal from fully mundane phenomena occurring in unearthly settings. However, many are not convinced by this interpretation and remain certain that the sighting is evidence of something much more significant. Only a small number of people have ever made the journey into space, and thus it's difficult for the average person to comprehend what the experience would be like. Whether the experiences of Yang Liwei and Dr. Musgrove were caused by real stimuli or were merely illusions or tricks of the light, we may never know the true story. Perhaps even more intriguing are the UFO-like objects identified on ISS's own cameras. These are clear to see, and if the items pictured are of a classified military nature, it is likely that we will never get an explanation. The topic of UFOs is an interesting one, and although some think of aliens when the subject comes up, it's important to note that a UFO is simply an object that can't be identified at that moment in time. It's only been in recent years that the two have been paired. With that being said, more and more UFOs are being reported every year, with some of the most recent ones coming from the recent SpaceX launch. As of right now, the majority of these UFOs that are recorded in space remain a mystery. The mathematical implications of Fermi's paradox, according to the maths posited forth by renowned physicist Enrico Fermi, there seem to be mathematical implications relative to the nature of our Milky Way galaxy that makes it the prime location for life to come into existence. If Fermi's findings are mathematically sound, then there is overwhelming possibility that life is extremely abundant within our galaxy. And the odds of extraterrestrial life existing and being capable of visiting our planet is more than just a possibility. It is almost a near certainty. Despite what the maths clearly show, however, The lack of first contact with an alien species directly contradicts the expected development of the life in the universe and ultimately creates a paradox that cannot be explained. In fact, it is so much not the case that it is mathematically implausible. For comparison, the Milky Way galaxy is filled up with roughly 400 billion stars. 20 billion of these 400 billion are suspected to be sun-like stars. Understanding the new advancements made by the Kepler Space Telescope, we know that roughly 1/5 of those sun-like stars have at least an Earth-sized planet in a habitable zone, which can vary greatly as the recent discovery of the TRAPPIST system that held 7 Earth-like planets in habitable zones seemed pretty common. If even so little as 0.1% of those planets had life on them or some variation of life, then there would be roughly 1 million planets with life in just the Milky Way galaxy. But there isn't. Even taking time into consideration only seems to make the maths even more implausible. The chances for life are pretty great. The Milky Way itself is about 13 billion years old. The first habitable planets in the Milky Way would have come into existence about 2 billion years after the universe was formed. This leaves roughly an 11 billion year period since our formation for other advanced life to have been formed, and since Earth is only 4 billion years old, there has most likely been trillions of likely chances and scenarios in the Milky Way alone for life on other planets to pop into existence. All we would require to notice other life would be for one species of these trillions of potential incidences to advance into a spacefaring civilization. Given the fact that research states that with our population growth and technological rate, our developments alone would allow human beings to colonize the entire Milky Way galaxy in about 2 million years, if we assume all outcomes the same, we should have been able to see an alien civilization by now, considering the time, chances, and probability of other life to have formed. Fact that we do not is horrifying. This had led many researchers to believe that maybe the forming of complex life isn't the issue, and that perhaps there is an extinction-level event to filter out the formation of complex life right around the corner, including for ourselves. The lack of life in our Milky Way galaxy, despite all of the maths and probability claiming the opposite, is known as Fermi's paradox and continues to be a mystery that researchers can't explain to this day. 100 years left on Earth. Quite possibly one of the most thought-provoking arguments made by Dr. Stephen Hawking was his claims made about the probability of events that could spell disaster for the whole of humanity. By his calculations regarding the overall statistical probability of the Earth facing a cataclysmic event at a large enough scale to cause human extinction, Dr. Stephen Hawking stated that it would only take as little as 100 years before humans would be unable to inhabit our planet Earth any further. The cause for such calculations, he regarded, were due to several factors that most people never even took into consideration. Not only is climate change and global warming an important issue that should be addressed, but by his calculations there is no possible way to overcome the issue regardless of any form of technological advancement. What many people do not realize about the issues of climate change is that reducing carbon emissions does nothing to stop or prevent climate change overall. It merely slows it down. Dr. Stephen Hawking compares the problem to that of a car speeding towards a cliff. Slowing down the car does not prevent it from falling into the ravine. It merely prolongs the inevitable. Considering the fact that as temperatures have risen, this has caused water vapors from the oceans to form, which in turn create additional greenhouse effects. It is impossible to stop the effects of climate change regardless of how many emissions are cut unless every single emission is reduced by 100% and the technology capable of causing an artificial cooling is created. Two events with a higher statistical improbability than the extinction event itself. Given these factors alone, one would not be surprised in the slightest by Dr. Stephen Hawking's predictions. But his doomsday fortune does not stop there. Not only does he cite global warming as an issue of a cataclysmic scale, but he also believed and argued that we have reason to fear other advancements as well. From artificial intelligence uprising to alien invasions, Dr. Stephen Hawking claims that the only way humanity will persist past his line of extinction is to make attempts at preserving our genetic lineage by looking to the stars and accepting the fate of our planet as a whole. The Earth only has 100 years left, and we are currently in a countdown race against an extinction-level event itself. Urban legends and myths of all kinds seem to surface from all around the world as reports of strange, supernatural, paranormal and extraterrestrial accounts spread through a town or region like wildfire. Some of these urban legends tend to never leave the region in which they first began, whereas others might make national headlines all around the world in their appearance. So today, we will be covering 5 terrifying urban legends that come from the Middle East, and the strange origins. The Van Lake Monster. After erecting a large 4-meter-tall statue located near the Van Lake, it became apparent to critics and skeptics that this urban legend, despite any number of claims against its legitimacy, was here to stay. This was, of course, that of the Lake Van Monster. Back in 1889, on the 29th of April, the Ottoman newspaper Saadet published an article that claimed an older man had been dragged down into the lake by a large sea creature. These reports seem to align perfectly with that of an ancient Armenian mythology that told of large sea creatures described as serpents with wings inhabiting the lake. Since this original reporting back in 1889, there has been a number of sightings of sea creatures in the lake that have contributed to the modern-day myths of the Van Lake Monster. Back in the 1990s, there appeared to be a series of sightings of the creature made by the local Kurdish population during small fishing trips or leisurely trips out onto the body of water. This eventually led to the recovered footage made by a local man known as Unal Kozak, who claimed to have captured footage of the creature back in 1997. His footage was sent to video analysis experts that claimed that the footage was not edited in any way, though they may not have been able to rule out the use of practical effects. Today, the urban legend seems to be responsible for the prime source of income to the region, as people from all over the world have journeyed to the lake in the hopes of spotting the strange winged serpents for themselves. The Shamaran. According to the surviving Turkish legends, there appears to be a creature known as the Shamaran, a name that roughly translates to mean the king of the snakes. This king of the snakes is reported as living underneath the ground of the modern-day country of Turkey, in a large necropolis referred to as the Land of Snakes. If the legends are true, the only mention of the way into the Land of the Snakes is through a small cave in the country that holds a well that reportedly always has fresh honey flowing from it. Inside the cave there are secret lanes that lead down into the Land of the Snakes, in underground megacities built millennia ago. Here is where the Shamaran and its loyal subjects live. The Shamaran is described as having 2 heads. One is that of the face and upper torso of a beautiful woman, whereas the bottom half is that of the face and body of a large serpent. The Shamaran is reported as being gifted in the knowledge of medicine and the ability to heal all wounds of all kinds, even inflicted events that can cause damage to the brain or mental troubles of any kind. Today, the legend of the Shamaran lives on, as many believe that there still might be a lane to the Land of the Snakes when visiting one of the many naturally formed caves in Turkey. The Sarakis Peak. The Kastaglari Mountains of Turkey are seen as some of the most beautiful mountain ranges in the area, and contain a number of interesting stories and strange urban legends that are told in the modern day. One of these strange legends concerns that of the highest peak of the Kastaglari Mountains, known as the Sarakis Peak. According to ancient traditional myths, there was a story of a young girl that had been born in a nearby village of the mountains, the village of Gur, and would grow up to be the most sought-after lady in the entire village. This led to a number of men coming to the father, asking for the right to marry the beautiful daughter and taking her as their own bride. Concerned that the men had hearts filled with evil, the father rejected the men and kept the daughter single for as long as he saw fit. This led to a number of men holding a grudge against the father, knowing he was too proud and possessive of the daughter, and so concocted a plan that would lead to the daughter's death. The men came together and went to the father, lying to him that the daughter had done terribly sinful acts with them during the night when he had not been watching her. Believing the father would then strike the daughter down and kill her, the men left to find new wives and continued on with their day. Overcome with anger and grief, the father instead banished the daughter to that of the tallest mountain peaks in the region, of which would later come to be known as the Saraks. Instead of perishing on the mountain, however, the daughter was blessed in her beauty and innocence and soon found a number of Tambali geese that she could farm and live off. Eventually she came to be known as one of the guides of the mountain, a beautiful, almost magical woman that would help desperate hikers and lived on the tallest peak. The legend is told today amongst hikers in the region that would have claimed to have had visions when they were dehydrated or fearful of their lives when traversing through the mountains. This led to them seeing the image of a beautiful woman, guiding them through the pathways and areas, helping them to reach safety in time and saving their lives. This has led many to believe that the legend surrounding the peak was real, and that the ghost of the daughter continues to help desperate hikers even in the modern times. The myth of the mirrored cave. One of the stranger myths from the Middle East is that of the myth of the mirrored cave located nearby the city of Amazai. Those that have visited the cave will have noticed the rocks of the cave of Analimagara seem to possess a bright reflective power to them as they glow in the sunrises in the early morning, hitting the cave at a perfect angle to cause the fiery reflections. This had led to many variations in retellings of an old mythological legend that involved a king's cursed daughter. According to the myth of the mirrored cave, many millennia in the past, a daughter was born to the king that was cursed to let out a blinding fiery light when viewed by anyone. This led the king to cover his daughter up for the majority of her life, her face unable to be seen by a single soul, including himself. When it came time for his daughter to marry, the king worried that there would be no man capable of handling the immense power that irradiated from his daughter. So rather than allowing just nobles to marry his daughter, he found that if any man was able to hold back his daughter's power, he would gain her hand in marriage. Many tried to look upon the daughter, but would often fall to the floor trembling after a blinding light would strike them upon viewing her. It wasn't until a poor young man from one of the lowest regions of the kingdom attempted to take the throne by marrying the daughter that the story ended in tragedy. As he lifted the veil, he became overpowered by the daughter's curse but stood ready, unwilling to move as he was tired of poverty and wished to give his family a better life. They stood there, locked in each other's gaze for several more moments before both the daughter and the poor young man burst into flames and fell apart into ashes. The king, finding the boy to have been worthy, mixed the ashes together and scattered them over the cave in a gnarly magara, the source of the rock's reflective powers, and rewarded his family as the rightful heirs to the throne. The legend of the Kataya fortress. There appears to be an old legend that tells of an ancient race of giants having once inhabited the city of Kataya many eons ago, before humans began to inhabit the region. They were rumored to have been ageless, able to live for as long as they wished, but could actively be killed by means of attack or tragedy. Their leader was an old giant that was around 1,000 years of age when, in order to protect, he ordered his giant kind to line up in a single file line from the Nemrut Mountains all the way to what is now known as Hisar Hill. As they lined up, he would grab a massive boulder from the mountain and pass it down the line, allowing the boulders to travel a great distance and end up at the hill to be used for construction of massive stone walls, placed together without mortar of any kind. Shortly after this project began, however, his young 300-year-old son became injured by a falling boulder, killing him instantly. As this was the first time the leader had ever seen death, he lost his mind in a fit of grief and said that the fortress he had now built will forever be seen as a region of death. The land of Kataya is believed to be cursed with that of the blood of giants, and if a giant was to ever return, would find himself mortal. The Nemrut Mountains are described as the mountains of the gods and is seen by many as the birthing place of giants. But what do you make of these mysteries? As the modern world continues to grow, we find more and more mountain towns facing a number of strange reports as their population continues to rise. This could be due to the fact that as we build and uncover the mysteries of recent uninhabited mountain regions all across the world, we face encounters previously believed to have been the stuff of myths and legends. So today we'll be taking a look at two mountains, and they're the Grand Canyon. Global warming is exposing the bodies of those who passed away on Mount Everest. Unfortunately, over 300 of these motivated and adventurous climbers lost their lives on this treacherous trail. Due to the terrain and dangerous nature of the climb, to exhume fallen climbers' bodies would cost between $40,000 and $80,000 for each of the corpses. A frozen body can weigh over 300 pounds, making the already strenuous descent hazardous operation. Because of that, nearly 2/3 of the bodies of past climbers are destined to stay on Everest for eternity. However, as these climbers knew the danger of the climb, they have often mentioned before ascending that if they were to die, they would be happy to remain on the mountain, and removing the bodies are rarely considered unless explicitly requested by the family. With climate change altering global temperatures and rapidly depleting the world's ice caps, it has been reported that more of Everest's deceased are visible than ever before. Because of climate change, the ice and glaciers that are rapidly melting now expose more of the fallen climbers. The ice level at and around the base camp has declined significantly, revealing bodies, bones, and limbs that had been long covered by ice. Unsurprisingly, numerous bodies have also surfaced at the Khumbu Icefall, which is one of the most dangerous parts of the South Col route to Everest's summit. Professional climber Mr. Sherpa, who holds a world record for ascending Everest 24 times, says that finding bones is the new normal on Everest. While a 6-time Everest summiteer, Jelji Sherpa, said on his first climb in 2008 he saw 3 bodies, whereas in a more recent climb he saw at least double that number, and his findings reportedly haunt him. Some of these corpses have become so well known that they serve as landmarks to other climbers. One of the mountain's most famous deceased residents is Green Boots. Identified by passers-by for his knee on Green Boots is strongly believed to be Indian climber Soang Paljor, who would have passed away climbing Everest in 1996. However, the identity of Green Boots has never been confirmed. In 2014, Green Boots was reportedly missing from view but reappeared in 2017, possibly a symptom of the changing climate. Uranium at the Grand Canyon, considered one of the 7 natural wonders of the world. The Grand Canyon is a natural attraction visited by millions every year. The geological marvel is known for its layered bands of red rock that expose a tremendous geological history. However, the landmark also holds deposits of minerals that have enticed miners for years. Uranium naturally occurs within the rocks and the Grand Canyon. Uranium is a radioactive material, meaning radiation is always present in the surrounding environment. A study confirmed that the amount of radiation in the air is at background level and is not of concern for the public's health or canyon spectators. Uranium mining at the Grand Canyon began with the uranium craze in the 1950s. Millions of tons of or were mined from the area during this time. There are hundreds of now abandoned uranium mines surrounding the Grand Canyon that have been polluting the geological wonder, as well as the homes of the Havasupai tribe. When the uranium market picked up again in the mid-2000s, mining around the area continued, this time leaving behind thousands of uranium ore claims. The water supply and surrounding environment greatly suffered from this, leaving the Havasupai people with a contaminated water supply. In 2012, a 20-year ban on uranium mining was finally placed on 1 million acres of the Grand Canyon and surrounding area to protect all that depend on the land. The mining ban also gave scientists adequate time to research the long-term effects of those radioactive mines and the severity of the risk to local people and animals. However, as of October 2020, there were still over 600 active mining claims in public lands around the Grand Canyon. On February 15, 2021, Representative Raul Grijalva, an American politician, introduced the Grand Canyon Protection Act, H.R. Point 1052, to once and for all ban new uranium mines around Grand Canyon National Park. It passed the House with bipartisan support less than 2 weeks later and is currently in the Senate. While this is excellent news, it is not the only uranium-related scandal in the Grand. From the years 2000 to 2018, 3 5-gallon buckets of uranium ore were displayed at the Grand Canyon National Park Museum beside a taxidermy exhibit. After nearly 2 decades in the museum, patron Elston Stevenson reported the buckets to a Park Service radiation specialist for safety concerns. After the report, the area around the buckets was tested for radiation and was said to have a higher than the background or safe amount of radiation. However, the reports found that the rest of the museum was unaffected by the radioactive buckets. Even though this was considered to be of minimal risk to employees and visitors, the buckets were removed and safely discarded from the display. Mountain madness found to be a real psychosis. Imagine you are a lone mountaineer and suddenly you hear a voice and someone begins to follow you. This is far from abnormal and is in fact a terrifying reality for many climbers. Although hallucinations have always been common with high altitudes, the phenomenon was initially thought to be a form of altitude sickness. These climbing-based psychotic episodes, known as mountain madness, are now considered to be a very real form of psychosis. It is extremely common for climbers to lose touch with reality, seeing movement where there is none and hearing human voices and music in silence. These visual and auditory symptoms are prevalent for mountaineers at high altitudes. The other phenomenon that these people often experience is a somesthetic illusion called the third man factor, where they believe they are climbing with someone else. The study of this phenomenon is continuing by emergency medicine doctors from URAC Research and the Medical University of Innsbruck. Findings have confirmed that the symptoms are unrelated to typical ailments that come from high altitudes but are entirely psychotic. This mountain madness is now formally known as isolated high-altitude psychosis. In reaching this conclusion, researchers analyzed 83 psychotic episodes found in German mountaineer. The first-hand findings of one of the researchers when climbing Everest also contributed to the findings. When Dr. Jeremy Windsor climbed Everest in 2008, at an altitude of over 5.1 miles, Dr. Windsor was met by a man named Jimmy. Jimmy climbed side by side with Dr. Windsor, providing words of encouragement and support. The two spoke all day while they continued their climb when suddenly Jimmy vanished without a trace. It is now known that Dr. Windsor hallucinated Jimmy as a symptom of isolated high-altitude psychosis. Most often, these symptoms start to appear when climbers reach over 23,000 feet above sea level. The only cure for these symptoms is to descend the mountain. There have been no lasting effects of this form of psychosis, and people return to their normal state immediately once they reach a lower altitude. It is due to reduced oxygen levels in the brain, stress, isolation, or a combination of these, but unfortunately the cause behind these symptoms remains unconfirmed. There is no evidence of the frequency of these symptoms or if certain people are more susceptible to isolated high-altitude psychosis than others. Researchers hope to uncover more about this mountain madness because of the dangerous nature of hallucinations and psychosis while navigating treacherous terrains. But what do you make of these three discoveries? A new discovery has just been made close to Antarctica, and it's got people questioning what it is and how long it's been there. For large pyramids can be seen close to Antarctica, with many being confused, saying that they look very similar to the large pyramids found in Egypt, further saying they could have been placed here by ancient civilizations. Pyramid-like structures are certainly nothing new, with some of the oldest pyramids on our planet being found in Egypt, and being dated to over 4,000 years old. However, this date has been disputed by many, saying that advanced civilizations may have built these giant structures, and that it was the Egyptians who found them. One such place that backs up this theory is that of Teotihuacan, with historians saying that Teotihuacan is older than the Aztec people, and that it's not known which culture or civilization created Teotihuacan. The same theory is being applied to these mysterious structures, with people saying they don't look like mountains or anything natural, saying that you can see they look like they've been placed in a straight line. When the images were shared to groups online who study ancient structures and artifacts, even they were confused about what had been discovered, with various members saying that these are some of the best images of underwater pyramids that they've seen. One person said the following: "Some of the underwater pyramids that have been presented in the past don't look anything like pyramids, and just look like natural underwater features that are in the shape of a pyramid. The fact that this image looks similar to the pyramids in Egypt when viewed from above is certainly interesting. This doesn't mean that something otherworldly created them, but it could certainly mean that there's a lost civilization close by, and that in itself is incredibly interesting." End quote. Taking measurements will show you that these four structures measure 7,108 meters, or 23,320 feet. Scientists and historians have said that Antarctica does not, and has never had any civilizations inhabit there. Yet, when these types of discoveries are made, it causes people to question this idea. Another person said the following: "We should be following the facts and not just statements. The fact is that there are four large structures that look like pyramids just outside of Antarctica. So what we should be doing is sending a team there to go and investigate if it's anything of interest. Even if it turns out to be nothing, at least we'll have an answer. These days people will say things like they're not pyramids because scientists say that no one has ever lived there before. But that statement only works all the time that no discoveries are being made. Every year we are finding out more and more things about Antarctica, and we shouldn't be afraid of going against the grain when interesting discoveries are being made. End quote. This is a fair statement, as in the past many scientists have been proven wrong. One of these examples is that of the coelacanth. This creature was swimming around in our oceans hundreds of millions of years ago, and scientists said it became extinct around 80 million years ago. But in 1938, a living coelacanth was discovered in the Indian Ocean, near the southern coast of Africa. Incredibly, these creatures have been living since the time of the dinosaurs. With this much evidence gathered by the scientific community, it's no surprise then that it appears there are large tales involving the existence of real-life encounters with ancient creatures, and these have continued into the modern day. It's creatures like the coelacanth that prove that scientists can be wrong. And the same applies with these kinds of structures. Unless we've gone there and investigated it, we can't say for sure that these aren't pyramids. This isn't the only pyramid-like structure that's been found underwater. Pauline Zalitsky, a marine engineer, and her husband own a company based in Canada called Advanced Digital Communications. They were working on a survey mission in conjunction with the Cuban government off the coast of Cuba. Advanced Digital Communications were one of the 4 firms working in venture with Fidel Castro's government, and this was to explore Cuban waters. Their primary interest was finding treasure shipwrecks from the Spanish colonial era. The team was using heavily advanced equipment to scan the area when they noticed these bizarre structures. Some of these structures were found with smooth blocks and geometric shapes. Other blocks appear to be built into pyramid shapes. Others were completely circular. Months later, they returned to the site with another geologist. Knowing what they would find in the area, they returned with the appropriate technology to examine and record the structures. The large blocks seemed to resemble granite. The main piece of this is so confusing that it would have taken around 50,000 years for such structures to have sunk into their depths. The catch is that 50,000 years ago, there was not the architectural capacity in any of the cultures we are aware of that time, and that they wouldn't have been able to build such complex things. Despite such a media flurry, this story was soon buried in the sites left unresearched. Quick dismissal of the story has led some to question on whether or not there has been suppression of information regarding the finding. Whether the leads weren't cold, or that this is something that we were not meant to find, we might never know. It's discoveries like these that have caused some to say this is a perfect example of scientists ignoring the facts and going with the narrative rather than doing genuine investigations. As of 2018, the Ocean Service has said that over 80% of our oceans are unexplored. Although many have said that space is one of the last unexplored frontiers, the argument could also be made that our oceans make that list. After all, we've done a great job at mapping hard-to-reach regions on our planet, but haven't yet managed to research certain regions of our oceans. So what do you make of these interesting discoveries? Do you think they are pyramids that have been lost to the ocean? What are these natural underwater features? The Lockheed Martin State Route 72, also nicknamed the Son of Blackbird, is an American hypersonic aircraft currently under construction. It's the successor to the State Route 71 Blackbird, a plane that was able to reach speeds of 3,520 kilometers per hour or 2,200 miles per hour and heights of 85,000 feet. The most recent news is that this craft will be around 60 feet in length. What's mind-blowing is when you consider that the hypersonic technology of Vehicle 2, which is an experimental glide aircraft, is capable of hitting Mach 17, which is 13,000 miles per hour. To put that into perspective, the Eurofighter Typhoon, one of the world's most impressive combat aircrafts, can do 2,495 kilometers per hour, or 1,550 miles per hour. So knowing that they have this tank, the State Route 72 is expected to reach speeds of over 14,500 miles per hour, 12,000 miles per hour faster than the Eurofighter Typhoon. Lockheed Martin's State Route 72 could be ready within the next few years, with whispers of it being scheduled for first flight around 2023. However, there's some that have said that one's already been spotted by satellites. Google Earth images have started to be shared around again, showing what appears to be a futuristic-looking aircraft. Not much information could be gathered from the image alone, but that didn't stop users from sharing their theories. One of the first people to share the image was that of Secure Team 10, and since then it's been shared on various UFO groups, where users have debated what this thing is. One person said this object definitely looks futuristic. However, I doubt that a supersonic aircraft would be left out in the open. The image is genuine, but perhaps it's something else. End quote. Well, another person said this. To me, it kind of looks like a speedboat. The shape and size of it gives off the illusion that it's actually an aircraft, when, in my opinion, it isn't. I think I remember someone saying that close by is a lake, so perhaps it's just someone's bones. Another person said the following: after looking at these photographs for hours, I've come to the conclusion that this is not the State Route 72 or a hypersonic aircraft at all. I saw someone else comment something similar, and I think that what we're looking at is a test piece they used for calibrating radars. If you go by Lockheed Martin's word, then this hypersonic plane hasn't been developed yet. And would they really leave this craft out in the open for everyone to see? It certainly wouldn't be parked up like this. End quote. Someone even suggested that this craft was between 4 and 10 meters in length and could be an F-35 RC model. Although this may be the case, these projects are a reality, with Lockheed Martin officials saying that they are working on advanced development aircraft programs. The State Route 72 aircraft will be the most impressive aircraft on the planet, having state-of-the-art hypersonic technology. Some websites are even reporting that the State Route 72 will be able to strike targets anywhere in less than an hour. This 14,500 miles per hour aircraft will be an optionally piloted flight research vehicle, meaning that it will be able to fly without a pilot. Lockheed Martin Executive Vice President and Skunk Works General Manager Rob Weiss said the following to Aviation Week: "We've been saying that hypersonics are 2 years away for the last 20 years, but all I can say is that the technology is mature and we, along with DARPA and the services, are working hard to get their capability into the hands of our warfighters. And we're looking to do this as soon as possible." End quote. DARPA, the Defense Advanced Research Project Agency, said the following on their website: DARPA's Falcon Hypersonic Technology Vehicle 2. HTV-2 program is a multi-year research and development effort to increase the technical knowledge base and advance critical technologies to make long-duration hypersonic flight a reality. Data from the program informs policy, acquisition and operation decisions for future Department or Defense conventional prompt global strike programs. Hypersonic data is collected through extensive modeling and simulation, wind tunnel testing, and 2 experimental flight tests. The ultimate goal is a capability that can reach anywhere in the world in less than an hour. Falcon HTV-2 is an unmanned rocket launch maneuverable aircraft that glides through the Earth's atmosphere at incredibly fast speeds. Mach 20, which is approximately 13,000 miles per hour. At HTV-2 speeds, flight time between New York City and Los Angeles would be less than 12 minutes. The HTV-2 vehicle is a data truck with numerous sensors that collect data in an uncertain operating envelope. End quote. Although this sounds impressive, we mentioned in a previous video that people have been seeing this craft for a while now, and it's caused eyewitnesses to say that this technology has been around for decades. One notable craft is that of the mysterious Black Triangle, a craft that's been seen displaying extremely fast beams, much faster than those of jets. These black triangles are associated with unidentified crafts, and this is because of what they've been observed doing. Black triangles don't appear to make any sound, are able to hover motionless and close to the ground, are said to be much faster than any aircraft ever witnessed, and don't leave behind contrails. Pilots have even come forward with their encounters with these mysterious black triangles. One of the problems with this aircraft is that we know it exists. Every year thousands of people see these mysterious crafts in the sky. Various questions remain though. How are these crafts able to hover motionless in the sky without making a sound? How can they go from a standstill to thousands of miles per hour within a few seconds? And why does no one seem to know anything about them? Another mystery surrounding these crafts is that they're seemingly able to sneak into restricted airspace. So what do you make of this photograph? And what do you think about the new State Route 72 that's expected to reach speeds of over 14,500 miles per hour? Be sure to leave your questions and answers in the comments section below and help us to grow this community while working to solve these mysteries. Space is truly the final frontier when it comes to new discoveries. Every year, month, and even every day scientists are working hard to try and crack the code of our universe. This results in tons of amazing discoveries being made all the time. Our planet is the only astronomical object that is known to harbor life. Nonetheless, there are some interesting facts and discoveries that have been made about outer space and our solar system. It just so happens that Earth is not the only interesting planet in our solar system. Saturn is regarded by astronomers as a gas giant, with an average radius approximately 9 times larger than Earth's. Although Saturn has only 1/8 of the average density of the Earth, it possesses much more volumes, which makes it more than 95 times more massive. Saturn is unique among the planets. It's a massive ball made mostly of hydrogen and helium, and is adorned with thousands of beautiful ringlets. In recent years, NASA's Cassini spacecraft has sent back some fascinating images of Saturn, some of which have caused confusion. One of these images was captured back in 2016, when the spacecraft detected something large crashing through Saturn's airframe. Those monitoring the spacecraft then gave the objects the name of F-16QA and F-16QB. It suggested that these objects are likely ring particles. Similar collisions had been detected in 2006 and 2007. Interestingly, not all NASA workers agree on these objects around Saturn. In fact, one former employee made a bold statement saying that NASA have got proof of large, unidentified crafts that had been observed close to Saturn's rings, and that they'd seen these photographs. The employee goes on to detail that unidentified flying objects have taken an interest in Saturn's rings, and on numerous occasions we've captured them lurking close to the planet. Dr. Norman Bergrund, who's said to have been employed at NASA's Research Center, detailed that these crafts that have been captured are not hard to spot, mainly because they're massive, easily being several miles in length, and matching descriptions of unidentified crafts that had been observed by people on Earth. However, one difference between the two is that although they are the same shape, the alleged crafts seen close to Saturn are much bigger. He said the following about the mysterious objects. Alien spacecraft are proliferating in our solar system and around these ring planets. End quote. One of the ways he was able to find out about this crust was because he had access to raw images. These are images that are sent back to NASA that haven't yet been edited or tampered with. Something that's commonly done by the space agency and that they're open about. They claim that various images we see have been edited, or a part of various images that had been put together, commonly known as composite images. These raw images, however, gave him an insight into what the public weren't able to see, and in various photographs he could see giant crafts sitting close to Saturn and his rings. Knowing that these objects were being kept a secret, he decided that the general public should know about them, and so went about releasing a book. However, he soon realized that he wasn't able to get it published in the United States. This caused him to travel to Scotland in the hopes of getting it published there. He did, and the book was titled Ringmakers of Saturn. Many interesting photographs have been presented to back up his claims, but one of the most interesting one shows what appears to be a giant cylinder-shaped craft. He calls them electromagnetic vehicles. It was estimated that this giant object measured over 2,000 miles. Dr. Bergrund said the following about the mysterious objects. I don't know who built them, but what I found out is that these things inhabit Saturn. That's where I first discovered them, and they are proliferating. They are now in Uranus and Jupiter, wherever you see some rings now. I call it the ring maker. I could be looking down on the rings. I could see parallel lines crossing all of the rings at once. That's about as long as you can go. I could tell that those lines marked the outside of an object. I say this is an electromagnetic vehicle because I can identify streamlined patterns that I knew were what we called potential lines, and that says it was electrical. He claims that these crafts are building the rings on these planets, with theorists saying that these crafts can be found close to many of the celestial bodies in our solar system, including the Moon, Mars, and the Sun. It appears, though, that amateur researchers can't seem to agree on what these crafts are. Some believe that they're monitoring the solar system, while others believe that they're actually other life forms that we share our solar system with. One of the issues, though, is the size of these crafts. The majority of them are hundreds, if not thousands of miles in length. So what are these things? And if they are genuine, who's building them? One amateur researcher said the following: "These giant crafts need to be investigated as they have been witnessed for years. I think that at this point we have enough proof to make a case that they're real. One of the problems we have is that when we look at them, we apply human ideas, thinking that we couldn't build a craft of this size, so it can't be done. But this is the wrong way of looking at things, and will actually set us back if we keep doing this. Just because humans couldn't do it, it doesn't mean it can't be done. After all, we're talking about the universe here. Human laws don't apply. I think more research needs to be done surrounding this topic, and the quicker we take it seriously, the quicker we'll get answers." End quote. Scientists and researchers, though, are not impressed with these kinds of images, with them saying that the most likely explanation is that these objects are just space debris or anomalies picked up on camera equipment. When talking about unidentified flying objects in space, one researcher went on to say the following: "Most commonly, UFO claims are due to perfectly natural flaws or artifacts in our publicly available data. Some of the things that people are seeing are planets' cosmic rays, software glitches, and debris." End quote. So what do you make of these interesting images? As human beings look to the stars, we have made countless discoveries that only help to demonstrate how little we truly know about the universe that surrounds us. So today, we will be going over 3 recent scientific discoveries. Scientists are pretty sure they found a portal to the 5th dimension. Scientists believe they may have found more clues to a possible 5th dimension, which helps in trying to find an explanation for dark matter. Dark matter is hard to detect as it doesn't emit any visible light or energy. Scientists are adamant that this unseen force is a dominant ingredient that makes up the universe. The supposed 5th dimension is currently understood as a dimension where gravity and electromagnetism combine. This new discovery may not turn out to be as exciting as it might seem at first, but scientists believe it will help us to better understand and observe dark matter in the near future, as well as its impact on the universe. Even though dark matter makes up 75% of matter, it has never been observed. By expanding on the theory of a warped extra dimension, which was first stated in 1999, this new research builds on the idea that fermion masses could be entering a 5th dimension using portals, which in turn is creating dark matter. This new research could be a giant leap forward in our understanding of some of the universe's greatest mysteries, which so far have only been for sci-fi and fantasy writers to speculate. Hubble observations suggest a missing ingredient in dark matter theories. Astronomers studying the Hubble telescope observations have discovered that there may be a missing ingredient in our understanding of how dark matter operates. Astronomers have discovered a variance between the theoretical models of how dark matter should be apportioned throughout galaxy clusters and observations of dark matter's grip on clusters. Dark matter has not yet been observed as it doesn't emit any visible light. Scientists are only aware of its existence through its gravitational pull on the visible matter of the universe. Astronomers can, however, detect dark matter by measuring how its gravity distorts space. This is an effect which is known as gravitational lensing. Scientists have discovered that small concentrations of dark matter in clusters produce gravitational lensing effects that are approximately 10 times stronger than initially expected. Scientists made this discovery by observing several massive galaxy clusters that had been captured by the Hubble telescope, as well as the European Southern Observatory's Very Large Telescope, which is located in Chile. Galaxy clusters are made up of individual galaxy members. These clusters are known to be the largest repositories of dark matter. Each of these clusters are held together predominantly by dark matter's gravity. The individual cluster galaxies are themselves satiated with dark matter. Dark matter in clusters is consequently apportioned in either large or small scales. With the help of Hubble's high-definition images, as well as spectra from the VLT in Chile, a team of astronomers have been able to produce an accurate high-fidelity dark matter map. They were able to identify a lot of multiply-imaged, lensed background galaxies. By measuring the lensing distortions, the team of astronomers were able to trace out both the amount and distribution of dark matter. The team was also surprised when the Hubble images uncovered smaller-scale arcs and distorted images, packed with the larger-scale lens distortions in each of the cluster's cores, where the largest galaxies reside. The team believes that the embedded lenses are created by the galaxy of dense concentrations of dark matter, which is connected with individual cluster galaxies. Dark matter's dispersion within the inner parts of individual galaxies is known to intensify the galaxy cluster's overall lensing effect. The team also conducted spectroscopic observations by measuring the velocity of the stars which are orbiting within several of the cluster galaxies. Of the University of Ferrara in Italy said the following: based on our spectroscopic study, we were able to associate the galaxies with each cluster and estimate their distances. Pietro Bergamini of the INAF Observatory of Astrophysics and Space Science in Bologna went on to add, the star speed gave us an estimate of each individual galaxy's mass, including the amount of dark matter. The team of astronomers studied the dark matter maps in comparison to samples of simulated galaxy clusters with similar masses, situated at approximately the same distances as the observed clusters. The clusters in the computer simulations did not show an equal level of dark matter concentration on the smallest scales, the scales associated with individual cluster galaxies as seen in the universe. LIGO sees its biggest black hole crash yet. Approximately 7 billion years ago, two large black holes collided to form a new massive black hole. To date, this collision still stands as the largest to have ever been detected. And the black hole that it formed is still the largest that has ever been found. When it was first discovered, scientists were baffled as to how it could even exist at all. The ripples from that massive collision were picked up on the two laser interferometer gravitational wave observatory detectors in the United States and another one in Italy on May 21, 2019. These waves had been hurtling through space for billions of years. The waves were the result of the merger between two or more black holes, one of which was 85 times the mass of the Sun and the other one which is roughly 66 times the mass of the Sun. They had created a new supermassive black hole that was 142 times the mass of the Sun. The rest of the 9 times worth of Sun's matter was converted into energy after the collision, which shook the universe enough for LIGO and Virgo to detect and interpret the ripples it gave off, which allowed scientists to learn and understand how black holes as big could even exist. Nelson Christensen, a member of the Virgo collaboration, said in a statement, "This signal doesn't look much like a chirp, which is what we typically detect. It is more like something that goes bang. That bang shook our region of space for approximately 1/10 of a second, after traveling for a longer period of time than any gravitational wave that has previously been detected. After analyzing the shape of the wave, scientists were able to determine the type of black holes involved and their exact size. Until this discovery was made, black holes were thought to have fallen into 2 different categories: stellar mass black holes and supermassive black holes. Stellar mass black holes are known to form from collapsing stars and typically don't get much larger than a few dozen times the mass of the Sun. Stellar mass black holes are the black holes that LIGO and Virgo have previously detected merging. Supermassive black holes are on the other end of the spectrum. These consist of masses on a much larger scale, which can be millions or billions of times that of the Sun, with a gravitational force which can grow whole galaxies around them. The Milky Way has one, as well as most other similar galaxies, although scientists aren't exactly sure about where they came from or how they formed. No merger of such a monstrous black hole has ever been detected, so it's impossible to be certain. As LIGO, Virgo, and future detectors gather more data from different events in space, further research should be able to paint a clearer picture. and it's hoped that supermassive black holes should become easier to explain in the not-too-distant future. What do you make of these recent scientific discoveries? The world is full of unexpected discoveries and bold, extraordinary ideas. Science has come far in the past 2 centuries alone, bringing with it a brand new batch of ethical concerns and debates. So today we'll be taking a look at 3 recent scientific breakthroughs and discoveries. Scientists discover Zealandia. You would think it unlikely that there would be a hidden continent, but it just so happens that is exactly what scientists exploring the South Pacific have uncovered. In the 1990s, a team of 32 scientists from over 12 different countries found Zealandia in all its glory. Zealandia lies beneath the surface of the murky seas, thought to have been submerged over 80 million years ago. This secret continent is partially raised up on the ocean bed and appears to be roughly 2/3 the size and length of Australia, or about the size of India. Zealandia is located midway between New Caledonia and New Zealand, from which it gets its name. Several scientists have come out since its initial discovery with the argument that it ought to be officially recognized as one of Earth's continents. Who discovered it in the first place back in the 1990s reveals that the continent was on the ocean surface more recently than originally thought. The IODP, short for International Ocean Discovery Program, and the A&M University of Texas teamed up in their investigations of the submerged continent and found that its land levels made it possible for plant life and animals to cross between continents. And that was why it took us so long to find out about its very existence. However, new evidence attests it is not as lowly immersed as we believed, though it is still at least over a kilometer or 2/3 of a mile below surface level, making it extremely challenging to investigate properly, and thus surveys of it have been scarce. As recently as 2017, researchers managed to go on an expedition with sufficient equipment at 6 different sites. The water depths drilled more than 1,250 meters or 4,000 feet deep. The expedition was fruitful with 8,000 feet worth of sediment getting collected for analysis. These samples, when analyzed, can reveal a plethora of valuable information: volcanism, climate, when the region had its time above the surface, how the land changed through the millennia. Countless wonderful results could be found out. Gerald Dickens, the co-chief scientist at the Texan Rice University in Houston, explained that alongside sediment samples they found many fossils. He commented upon the matter. More than 8,000 specimens were studied and several hundred fossil species were identified. Once the analyses returned from the sediments and fossil samples, it was revealed that the environment of Zealandia was shockingly unconventional to what researchers expected. The spores and pollen taken from land plants and shells of various shallow sea organisms showed that the Ring of Fire, a circular formation in the Pacific Ocean where volcanic eruptions and earthquakes are a constant threat, had much to do with the continent's doomed sinkage. The Ring of Fire, over millions of years, caused drastic changes in the ocean's depth, which led to it overwhelming the poor continent and eventually consuming it. Rupert Sutherland, an expedition scientist at Victoria University of Wellington in New Zealand, has stated that those working on the project believe Zealandia sank beneath the waves after its separation from both Australia and Antarctica back when the continents were still forming. This grand discovery can help give us much-needed insight into what life was like in the South Pacific millions of years ago, particularly how plants and animals evolved, and furthermore can assist us in understanding the way our tectonic plates move. Perhaps scientists may even be able to use the Zealandia to produce accurate simulations of how the Earth's climate changes through the coming years. Researchers have grown human embryos from skin cells. Science is advancing at an exceptional rate. By reprogramming human cells found on our skin, biologists have managed to grow model versions of human embryos. This scientific breakthrough allows us the potential to learn more about developmental disorders, how to cure genetic illnesses, and maybe even could lead to solving infertility, specifically in the case of improving IVF treatments. Nature Today published a study that found that when you treat skin cells in a certain manner, they begin to transform into embryo-like structures. Jun Wu, the leader of a U.S.-Chinese scientific research group, reported such findings in his own studies, referring to early forming embryonic structures named blastocysts. Once again, as with each scientific breakthrough that occurs, we must ask ourselves whether the way forward is or is not moral. Is it morally correct for us to play with life, as it would give us the power to have live models of human embryonic development? Or is it wrong, unjust, and horrific? In the last 5 decades, we've found out an immense amount of information regarding how organs work, primarily due to the progress in stem cell research wherein scientists could produce human organs from human tissue outside the body. It is these organoids, miniature faux organs grown with the usage of our tissue, that let us know what happens to victims of the Zika infection and has granted us infinite medical knowledge that is priceless. It is also due to these studies that we have our current advanced ways of dealing with cancer, which we would not have without the arguably morally gray investigations. Whilst the skin cell embryos could show us how embryos form and the very basic early developments that occur during the first stages of pregnancy, they cannot give us insight into the complex specifics of what happens in the womb. After all, the lining of the uterus is required to establish a long-term pregnancy, but these models might still provide us with the answers we seek. An important thing to keep in mind is that these model embryos are not actual human embryos in the traditional sense. Whether they could be turned into actual embryos is uncertain but considered unlikely. Regardless of the fact these are not real embryos with the potential to grow into babies, many countries have strict laws when it comes to embryonic research. Bill Gates' venture aims to spray dust into the atmosphere to block the sun. Bill Gates, one of the most famous billionaires in the world, has been financially supporting the research of sun-dimming technology, which may theoretically reflect the sunlight trapped in the Earth's atmosphere back out to the cosmos, which would create a much-needed global cooling effect, helping us with the struggle of continuous global warming. The SCOPEX, or Stratospheric Controlled Perturbation Experiment, was launched by scientists from Harvard University who pondered on a way to assist our global struggle, finally coming up with a calcium carbonate dust spray which is notably non-toxic, and plan on spraying it into the air. Despite the great things this could bring, this has been an area of much controversy. Solar geoengineering is believed to be a science unworthy of the shoot, with many claiming it has many unforeseen hazards and could worsen the situation by creating a drastic shift in weather patterns that would only form more issues. Environmentalists also fear that using this as a quick fix will encourage unethical consumption of fossil fuels, which got us in this situation in the first place. Currently, the project is set to take an experimental step in June when they will travel to Kiruna, in Sweden, with the permission of the Swedish Space Corporation, where they are going to launch a balloon carrying their experiment up 12 miles high. It will not spray any of the calcium carbonate this time around. It is going to be a scope to see whether the balloon is maneuverable and works well. The next step may be releasing actual sprays into the atmosphere to test whether the theory is correct and if it will indeed help us deal with global warming. No one truly knows what effect this spray or geoengineering experiments will have long-term on our planet. Only after it is released into the atmosphere will we be able to observe its effects. Not to mention, there is much uncertainty regarding how much CaCO3 will be required to cool the greenhouse effect. There is a fear we may release too much and it could become a catastrophe. Freezing temperatures can cause atrocious famines and make ordinary survival difficult if we are not careful with how much CaCO3 is sent into the atmosphere. It could also cause more future refugee crises, with people all over the globe seeking shelter in countries with more stable temperatures. David Keith, a scientist, has suggested the formation of a risk pool to be used to aid smaller countries as compensation for any harm that may befall them from such experiments. But some consider it to be a cruel idea, as money cannot replace lands lost as collateral damage, should the land become inhabitable. Future plans for global geoengineering have been stopped in 2019 by various countries during a meeting of the United Nations, namely America, Brazil, and Saudi Arabia. In order for any proper progress to occur, there will need to be a global agreement, but considering all the risks, it seems the better alternative is for a bigger push towards renewable energy sources so that the usage of fossil fuels will stop. The world is full of revelations and transcendent discoveries, but no great discovery is made without the threat of sacrificing our morality, our very humanity, for the sake of technology. But what do you make of these three discoveries, and should we go through with any of these experiments mentioned? Retired Air Force Colonel has said that he has new evidence that he thinks the public deserves to know about. He said that him and many others have evidence that something visited us during 1980. The sighting of an unusual craft was detected above Bentwaters Royal Air Force Base in the UK. Colonel Charles Holt knew what he saw and so started the process of collecting sworn statements from those who were in and around the base at the time, which included air traffic controllers, tower watchmen, and others. Everyone he spoke to told him they'd tracked and watched an unidentified flying object that made its way into the area, noting that it was performing incredible aerial maneuvers, but didn't want to come forward with their statement due to fear, and so held on to it until the day they retired. On December 27th back in 1980, mysterious lights were seen by military personnel in the Rendlesham Forest. Various RAF personnel said they saw fast lights flying through the forest and above the base, with other members saying that when they went to investigate what was going on, they saw a triangular craft land within a clearing. This wouldn't be the end of the sighting, however, as on the second night the mysterious lights would return, which caused Deputy Base Commander Holt to lead a group into the forest. While there, he and others would see the mysterious craft themselves. This then led to Holt going around investigating what had happened, talking to other personnel to try and find out what they'd witnessed. He made a tape recording during the event, but also filed a report where he described that a laser beam was coming from the craft. He said the following in the report: early in the morning of 27th of December 80, approximately 0300 hours, two unidentified States Air Force Security Police patrolmen saw unusual lights outside the back gate at RAF Woodbridge. Thinking an aircraft might have crashed or been forced down, they called for permission to go outside the gate to investigate. The on-duty flight chief responded and allowed 3 patrolmen to proceed en route. The individuals reported seeing a strange glowing object in the forest. The object was described as being metallic in appearance and triangular in shape, approximately 2 to 3 meters across the base and approximately 2 meters high. It illuminated the entire forest with a white light. The object itself was hovering or on legs. As the patrolman approached the object, it maneuvered through the trees and disappeared. At this time, the animals on a nearby farm went into a frenzy. The object was briefly sighted approximately 4 hours near the back gate. The next day, 3 depressions, 1.5 inches deep and 7 inches in diameter, were found where the object had been sighted on the ground. The following night, 27th of December 80, the aerial was checked for radiation. Beta-gamma readings of 0.1 millirengens were recorded, with peak readings in the 3 depressions near the center of the triangle formed by the depressions. A nearby tree had moderate 0.5 to 0.7 readings on the side of the tree towards the depressions. Later in the night, a red sun-like light was seen through the trees. It moved around and pulsed. At one point, it appeared to throw off glowing particles, and then broke into 5 separate white objects and then disappeared. Immediately thereafter, 3 star-like objects were noticed in the sky, 2 objects to the north and 1 to the south, all of which were above 100 degrees off the horizon. The object moved rapidly in sharp angular movements and displayed red, green, and blue lines. The object to the north appeared to be elliptical through an 8 to 12 power lens. They then turned to full circles. The objects to the north remained in the sky for an hour or more. The object to the south was visible for 2 or 3 hours and beamed down a stream of light from time to time. Numerous individuals, including the undersigned, witnessed the activities in paragraphs 2 and 3. Signed, Lieutenant Colonel Charles Holt, United States Air Force Deputy Base Commander. Lieutenant Colonel Holt also went on to talk with the Huffington Post in detail that what he and others saw is definitely under intelligent control, going on to say the following: the military has nothing to do with it other than the cover-up. But I can tell you there is some type of superintelligence that can change size, change shape, and do funny things. What I saw and firmly convinced didn't have anything we know or could relate to inside it. Maybe they're not a being as we know. Maybe they're an entity that just has intelligence, and we just can't relate to it." End quote. Holt went on to say that he gathered sworn statements by those who'd witnessed the event. Going on to say the following: they saw the object go across their scope, a 60-mile scope, in 2 or 3 seconds, thousands of miles per hour, came back across their scope again, stopped near the water tower. They observed it. They watched it go over the forest where we were. End quote. He went on to detail that the government covers up these types of stories and says that there's a top-secret agency that controls everything to do this subject, including extraterrestrial visits to Earth, saying the following: there is a contract civilian agency that's fed information that is controlling everything. It's made up of either former military, high-level government agencies or high-ranking, very knowledgeable scientists. I can almost guarantee you that's the way we do it. And disinformation is the biggest thing. Holt is very disappointed and frustrated with how the Bentwater incident has played out, saying that various people have been told to keep quiet and that numerous files have gone missing over the years. In 2011, the UK released thousands of classified UFO documents to the public, but the ones that detailed the Rendlesham Forest incident were missing from that list. I was said the following about this: it doesn't surprise me at all because they were probably taken from them by somebody or sent somewhere by direction. Trust me, that's how it works. It's very disappointing on one hand, and it's also frightening. Who knows what else is going on? End quote. So what do you make of this mysterious encounter? And what do you think they witnessed that night? Although plane crashes are not common, they are some of the most tragic accidents that can occur. Families who lose loved ones on flights that crash and disappear can usually only wait hopelessly as crews attempt to locate the wreckage and recover any survivors, or give some form of closure for family members of those who did not survive. So today we will be looking at 3 instances where planes tragically crashed and were unfortunately only discovered much later. Not at all. Eastern Airlines Flight 980. Eastern Airlines Flight 980 was a flight from Paraguay on its way to Miami, Florida, when it began descending for a scheduled stop in Bolivia after having veered significantly off course for unknown reasons and struck Mount Illimani at around 6,000 meters, taking out everyone on board and scattering the wreckage over an incredibly large snow-covered glacial area. The accident was the highest altitude controlled flight into terrain in commercial aviation history, and investigators were eager to uncover the cause for such a catastrophic incident. However, because of the incredibly remote terrain, expeditions were only able to recover a few articles and no bodies, with no indication as to why the plane had crashed. The plane's black boxes, or their flight data recorder and cockpit voice recorder, were never found. When black boxes go missing after a plane crash, it is usually because the plane crashed in the sea and the black box was unrecoverable at the bottom of the ocean. However, 2 young Americans were interested in Flight 980 because the black box was undoubtedly somewhere on land, not at the bottom of the sea. So Isaac Stoner and Dan Fettrell began researching the 5 previous expeditions that had unsuccessfully attempted to recover bodies or flight recorders. Many theories were fueled. When each expedition returned empty-handed, as contraband was frequently smuggled on flights from South America to Miami, and 5 members of Paraguay's richest families were on board the flight. Many people believed that the flight had been hijacked and the black boxes destroyed. However, Stoner and Futrell learned that the glacier had retreated and, combined with a lack of snowfall, this meant that if anything had been hidden below the snow, it would likely be visible on their trip. If there was a time to find out if the black box was still on that mountain, this was it. The men prepared for the 6,000-meter elevations that they would reach by sleeping in altitude tents at night and performing upper arm workouts to prepare for ice climbing. Some of the wreckage had fallen down a cliff about 915 meters below the rest of the wreckage, and frequent avalanches also likely rearranged the wreckage. So they also plotted the possible alternative locations of pieces of the plane. They arrived in Bolivia on May 17, 2016, ready to begin the hunt. After a 2-day hike, they arrived at the wreckage of the plane, with mangled pieces of cockpit and personal items spread out over a square mile, in a sobering reminder of the tragedy that had occurred there. After searching with their team for a while, they uncovered a human femur and discovered in different locations, which they buried and marked with rock piles for later recovery. They found many more parts of the cockpit, along with thousands of likely contraband reptile skins, but no sign of a black box until the final day, when Stoner found some metal with wires labeled CKPT Vorkard and a nearby spool of magnetic tape. After returning home with Bolivian sign-off from the U.S. National Transport Safety Board, they handed over what they hoped would be the cockpit recordings to authorities. Unfortunately, the metal turned out to only be the holder for the cockpit flight recorder, and the tape was a recording of a television show. But their expedition gave closure to many families who lost loved ones in the crash, as well as the hope that the black boxes are still up there on the mountain, waiting for discovery. Expeditions are already being planned to recover the human remains, and many hope that a formal Gove expedition to search for the black boxes will follow. Flying Tiger Line Flight 739, sometimes the wreckage of flights are never able to be recovered. The Flying Tiger Line Flight 739 was one of these tragic instances. The Lockheed L-1049 Super Constellation was chartered by the United States military and was carrying 11 civilian crew members and 96 military passengers from Travis Air Force Base, California, to Saigon, Vietnam on March 16, 1962. After a scheduled refueling stop at an Air Force base in Guam, it was headed to the Philippines for a final refueling before the last leg of its journey when it disappeared without a trace and none of the passengers were ever recorded or heard from again. The last known position was a routine message radioed in from the pilot, giving the plane's location as about 450 kilometers west of Guam, before heavy radio static created severe communication difficulties. When the static subsided a little over an hour after the last message, Guam radio operators were unable to establish contact with the flight for a position report, and the plane was never seen or heard from again. What followed was one of the largest air and sea searches in Pacific history, with the Navy, Air Force, Coast Guard, and Marines all dispatching ships and aircraft to the area. Crisscrossed over 500,000 square kilometers of ocean, searching for survivors or remnants of the aircraft. Several crewmen on a tanker in the near vicinity of the plane's estimated position reported seeing a light in the sky that was so bright it lit up the ship's decks, followed by 2 red lights falling into the ocean. The tanker immediately sailed to where the 2 fireballs fell, but were unable to discover any sign of a wreck in their ensuing 6-hour search. This observation caused officials to rule that the plane had likely exploded in midair, and the media and airline officials suspected sabotage. Backing up the theory of sabotage is the fact that a second Flying Tiger Line flight chartered by the military and departing from the same base at the same time as Flight 739 was also destroyed in a similar manner on the same day, but this ship was carrying secret military cargo. Officials have stated that the explosion of the Super Constellation during the normal operations was impossible, and that an explosion powerful enough to blow the ship completely apart must have been caused by something violent, as there was nothing on board powerful enough to cause such an explosion. However, as nothing was able to be recovered, there is no concrete evidence for this theory, and we can only guess at what might have happened. Air France Flight 447 Air France Flight 447 was an international passenger flight departing from Rio de Janeiro, Brazil en route to Paris, France on June 1, 2009. Mid-flight, the systems on board stalled out and the flight plummeted into the Atlantic Ocean, taking the lives of all 228 passengers and crew on impact, making the crash the highest aviation accident in the history of Air France. The search and recovery effort was incredibly widespread and lasted for over a week as teams attempted to find pieces of the wreckage that might give them a clue as to what had happened and return bodies to their homes and families for burial. At its peak, the recovery team numbered over 1,000 individuals from the Brazilian military, with 15 aircraft devoted to scanning the surface of the ocean. By June 16, 50 bodies had been recovered and identified, and underwater searches began for the missing black boxes that would tell investigators what had caused the devastating crash. Because the terrain of the ocean floor in this area was over 3,000 meters deep in places and incredibly rugged, it took over 2 years before the debris of the wreckage was located on the ocean floor, including the black boxes and the remainder of the bodies. Although some initially suspected sabotage or terrorism and a criminal investigation for manslaughter was opened in the days following the crash, the official report on the cause of the crash following the recovery of the flight data recorder and the cockpit voice recorder was able to finally explain what had happened. Reports say that the plane's speed sensors began to indicate conflicting measurements, possibly because of ice crystals blocking the plane's pitot tubes, which then caused the plane's autopilot to disconnect. This in itself is not enough to cause the plane to crash, but the cockpit voice recorder tells how the three pilots reacted inappropriately to the system failure, worsening the situation. The occurrence of the failure in the context of flight in cruise completely surprised the crew of Flight AF-447. In the first minute after the autopilot disconnection, the failure of the attempt to understand the situation and the disruption of crew cooperation had a multiplying effect, inducing total loss of cognitive control of the situation, claimed the official report on the cause of the accident. The plane stalled out in the air, triggering warning signals and a strong buffeting effect, but the crew never realized they were stalled and thus failed to take the proper recovery maneuvers, and in fact pointed the nose of the plane upwards instead of down. The plane hit the water belly down, immediately killing everyone on board from the speed of descent and trauma of impact. Aviation specialists have used this tragic crash to make several safety improvements on aircrafts, as well as increasing training of pilots for emergency situations and communications such as this. But what do you make of these tragic aviation disasters? Despite the countless skeptics and claims against the alien awareness movement, a massive amount of witness accounts and substantial scientific evidence has come forward over the years surrounding the existence of extraterrestrial life and the proof surrounding their visitations of our planet. Terrell Copeland's story is one that's fascinated many. The former U.S. Marine is from Virginia and details he's had several UFO encounters, going on to say that one of these crafts even abducted him. The U.S. Marine's story is often brought up because believers say it's hard to dismiss. In 2009, he and 1,500 people held a secret meeting in a small New England town. The meeting was attended by those who were interested to learn about UFOs and aliens. In the meeting, Copeland opened up and revealed that back in 2005, he witnessed a mysterious triangular craft in the sky, saying that it was hovering above a shopping center. It's important to note that the triangular-shaped craft is somewhat of a mystery. There are some believers that think that this craft belongs to our military, while others say that due to how fast it can fly and due to how long it's been seen on our planet, it doesn't belong to us. The second encounter happened 2 years later in 2007, in which he said he was able to capture this one from his apartment building. He said the following: "It was an orb of light, just a big ball of light. It wasn't moving. One was solid white. The other was directly across the street, around 300 feet from the ground, and was changing colors very rapidly." End quote. After this, he published the video online and was interested to see what people thought of it. Not long after posting the video, he reported that he had a knock at the door. When he opened it, he said there was a mysterious man standing there. And when he asked who he was, the man replied that he was a military contractor and wanted to talk to him about his recent sighting. One of the questions the man asked was the following: "Do you believe the U.S. government is in contact with otherworldly beings?" End quote. However, this was only the beginning, as after these encounters he would go on to experience lost time, sleep paralysis, and even abductions. He details that back in 2006 he was abducted by a large craft, and when he came around he could see there was a woman in front of him who didn't quite look human, noting that she had human features, but that she also had large black eyes and an elongated skull. This experience didn't seem to affect him too much, and he even had an open mind about the whole encounter, saying the following: "I just want to be a better person, because if I feel someone from above took notice of me, then maybe I'm doing something right. And maybe if I'm doing something right, maybe I can do better." End quote. Some UFO believers took this further and suggested that he may be part alien, and that the woman he saw could have been related to him in some way. He responded with the following: "That's heavy. It's not surprising to me though. After all that's happened these last couple of years. Could be true. Many are interested in the mysterious individual that knocked on his door," and go on to say it's likely he was visited by the mysterious men in black. Researchers have said it's more than obvious at this point that not only is there a secret agency working around the clock to suppress any information regarding extraterrestrial life, but this secret agency also works to intimidate, threaten, discredit, or even attack people in the alien community who happen to stumble upon damning evidence or have spent their lives trying to expose the truth. This secret agency, be it an agency that works with the government or above them, has come to be known around the world as the hidden men in black, that will stop at no means to prevent the truth from leaking out into the public mind. Many skeptics will claim that supposed figures are nothing more than the paranoid manifestations of theories, who try to validate their work. But the people who are truly in the know are well aware of the vast amount of evidence of such encounters with the men in black. Alien abductions interest many of us. There's a handful of interesting cases that have come to light in recent years. And although scientists and researchers have tried to explain them away, it's things like sleep paralysis. Others have said this phenomenon should be taken more seriously. Another interesting case is that of Judy Doherty. An often recurring theme of extraterrestrial abduction stories is that many alien abductees are unaware of being victims of an abduction until hypnosis allows them to unlock repressed memories seemingly locked away from their conscious minds. This also appears to be the case with the witness account of Judy Doherty. According to Judy's case, back in 1973, four witnesses were traveling home to Texas City when they encountered a strange light that was described as hovering in the night sky. The four witnesses, Judy, her daughter Cindy, Judy's mother, and Judy's sister-in-law, all got out of the car to get a better look at the craft. Suddenly, a period of time passed and the light moved away and disappeared into the distance. Following the event, Judy began complaining of severe migraine headaches, generalized anxiety, and trouble sleeping following the encounter. After visiting a handful of doctors, all of whom believed that the symptoms were most likely physical manifestations of stress, Julie visited with Dr. Leo Sprinkle, a well-known ufologist and trained hypnotist, to help alleviate her stress. Once under hypnosis, Julie began to uncover repressed memories of an alien abduction that took place during the sighting that the four witnesses made only several weeks prior. According to Judy, and later corroborated by her daughter after ongoing hypnosis therapy, the four women were taken aboard the craft and witnessed two small alien entities cut apart a cow and watch them remove its organs. After this, the daughter was then placed on an operating table as the aliens began taking a variety of samples from her. However, Judy nor the daughter go into details by what they mean by this. Once the hypnosis therapy was finished, Judy's symptoms cleared up almost immediately. So what do you make of these interesting stories? And do you think that alien abductions are real? A former Canadian defense minister, who has said that the world's most powerful people are concealing the presence of aliens, is asking the government to release what they know about UFOs and extraterrestrials. Paul Hellyer has an impressive background. He served as Canada's defense minister in the 1960s. He oversaw the drastic changes within the Royal Canadian Navy, Canadian Army, and the Royal Canadian Air Force, in which they were eventually turned into a single organization. It's his recent comments, though, that have caused him to be featured in the mainstream media. Mr. Hellyer started to make comments on unidentified flying objects around 2015, where he stated that these crafts are just as common as planes, going on to say that aliens have been visiting Earth for many years now, and the reason they started to take an interest in us is because of the atomic bomb. Many UFO researchers have said that when the first atomic weapons were being tested, there was a huge increase in UFO sightings. Mr. Hellyer, along with those who researched the phenomena, explained that when aliens saw what we were doing with atomic bombs, we suddenly became a great threat to the cosmos. In an interview with Russia Today, he said the following: "The reason for this was that man was stupid enough to invent the atomic bomb. Aliens are frightened that we're going to use it again and again, and this will affect the whole balance of the cosmos." End quote. Mr. Hellyer suggested that various people who worked for the United States government know what's going on, and even said that when you're put in contact with the correct people, it doesn't take long for you to get the proof. He explained that the documents he's received and the people he's talked to have told him there's between 2 and 12 different alien species. And one of the reasons why people don't know about this is because the majority of them look like us. This is in line with what people have said in the past. In fact, according to the Mutual UFO Network, the second most commonly reported alien is nearly completely identical to human beings in almost every way, except for a few key differences. Referred to by MUFON as the Nordic alien species, The Nordic aliens are reportedly aliens that have long blonde hair, so blonde that it's commonly mistaken as being white, pale skin, deep blue eyes, and stand between 6 to 7 feet tall. The first ever reported encounter with the Nordic aliens was made back during the 1950s by a man named George Adamski, of whom would later go on to be one of the most famous ufologists, and finish a book titled Flying Sources of Landed and Inside the Spaceships. That would feature in-depth descriptions of his encounters throughout the 1950s. Many of those that have claimed to have encountered the Nordic aliens, or have been abducted by the species, claim that the Nordic aliens possess advanced telepathic abilities, able to communicate entire concepts and emotions with their abductees and instill them with a tremendous amount of new information. Although many claim that the species is benevolent in nature, with some claiming that the Nordic aliens are preparing to save the human race for abduction in the event of a world-changing catastrophe, there appears to be a number of doomsday cults that worship the Nordic aliens in sinister ways. Helia's main message, though, is that these aliens have the knowledge to change our planet, and that when the time comes he thinks they will step in and make the world greener. He said that higher officials told him this has to be done in the right way, otherwise people won't get on board, saying that information occasionally gets leaked to the public, and this is in order to get them accustomed to the idea. Many members of the alien community have speculated that perhaps the main cause for the government's continued overall lack of transparency regarding the existence of extraterrestrial visitors is due to an old report provided by the Central Intelligence Agency's Psychological Strategy Board that concluded that the public's potential reaction to unidentified flying objects could be constituted as a threat to national security. Interestingly, this appears to not be the case in recent years. The 1950s was a long time ago, and since then the idea of extraterrestrial visitation has been welcomed with open arms by the public. And the normalizations of such alien imagery via science fiction movies, popular comics, and worldwide media has played a tremendous role in this explosion of extraterrestrial fascination. Given recent findings by programs such as the Advanced Air Threat Identification Program, it's said that the very existence of the unidentified flying objects is already a national security threat. This has caused some to be torn, saying that if these objects were really a threat, then surely they would have done something by now. These talking points make for interesting discussions. But unfortunately, as of right now, many don't buy the idea that aliens are walking among us. Scientists, researchers, and organizations like NASA have said we've never found proof of alien life. The UFO community, on the other hand, believes that we've been visited, and that sometime in the near future the truth will come out, saying that why would our governments open various UFO programs and spend billions if they didn't exist? They say that there must be something going on for them to justify spending all this time and money. Interestingly, it was also announced that when the president signed the $2.3 trillion relief and government funding bill back in December, it also started the ball rolling on something else. As of that date, U.S. intelligence agencies have just 180 days to release everything they know about UFOs, a subject that has been featured in the mainstream media in recent months. The Director of National Intelligence and Secretary is said to have been put on the spot and will now have to reveal everything they know about these unidentified crafts. So what do you make of these interesting stories? Do you think UFOs and aliens have visited our planet? If not, why do you think our governments are so secretive about this topic?